Ghostemane. Noize. Noise. Ghostemane, Florida trap metal artist on his, 10th? 9th album by now? Mixtapes have just kind of been, like, thrown in with studio albums at this point. Like, it's kind of just friggin' weird how you determine what an album is, but I don't know. In any case, this is his 10th major release. Last year's Hexada, it turned me on to the dude, and truth be told, I think he did the trap metal fusion a lot better than what people said Suicide Boys did. But that was before I realized that people who say that Suicide Boys were trap metal were kind of just talking out of their rear ends. Now, they can be compared to each other because, to my recollection, both Ghostemane and Ruby from Suicide Boys have been in hardcore bands before their rap careers really took off. And that influence does show on some of their songs, but I wouldn't say that both of them went in the same direction with their music, especially not Suicide Boys, because it takes two people and two different influences. Besides that one thing, few similarities can be found. And those three guys are like all friends, so it's like, eh. But I will admit that even though I was not a fan of Hexada, but I liked Hexada, I'll say that, and I liked a few singles off of Plagues and Black Mage as well, I never called myself a fan of Ghostemane or what he did, or what he still does, I mean to say, because it's very, very hard for me to say that I'm a fan of something. Like, I gotta keep the history in mind, I gotta keep the entire discography in mind. There's a lot of things that go into me saying that I'm a fan of something, and it's simple. I mean, you can call yourself a Lil Peep fan and like a few Lil Peep songs, apparently, according to some people. For me, I actually have to like everything, and for Ghostemane, that's just not the case, because there's quite a few things about the artist and his style that just don't make me really excited for more of his stuff, as I was surprised actually that he released a new album this year. So that being said, after like 2 months after Hexada released, I cooled off on it, and I began to notice some of the flaws that I hadn't been noticing during my state of euphoria over, oh my god, trap and metal combining. Mostly due to his vocal style. I don't really get the yelping style that Ghostemane does. Like, I heard it enough from Ruby on Eternal Grey. I don't want a whole album based off of that style. And I get it. Ghostemane can't be like shouting and screeching all the time. I mean, look at Chris Barnes and George Fisher from Cannibal Corpse. Their voices are shot. That's what happens when you scream or growl way too much, even with the right technique, which Chris Barnes obviously didn't fucking use. But anyways, the same shouldn't happen to Ghostemane. He should be changing it up once in a while, and he has like 3 different vocal styles on this album, so I can't really complain. At least he's not mumbling, at least he's not sticking to one singing style, at least he's not sticking to one vocal style throughout the whole thing. He does change it up as the tracks progress. However, that does not mean I have to like the sound of it. And that vocal style is just, I really can't stand it for an album, a whole album. And that, like, grudge voice thing he does, that thing, I don't know if I can really tolerate that for more than an album either. Now, luckily, like I said, he changes it up, so I hear it in moderation on each of these songs. There's no whole song that goes like, hey, I smoked a bowl, and then I killed my wife, and then I killed my girlfriend, and then I killed myself, and then That's probably the reason why he didn't do that. But it's not just that one gripe. Ghostemane's music in general just has these little tidbits of things that I just don't like. Like, he's proven himself to be a unique artist in his own right. Like, when you mention Ghostemane, people in the underground scene will know who that is. But what comes along with that is that he's kind of followed the underground rap trend of releasing, like, 2-minute songs on average, if not less than 2 minutes. And because of that, this album right here, Noise, or Noise, is almost barely half an hour. It's like 3 hairs width away from being a half-hour album. So to call it an album, it's kinda testy. And I guess you could call it an LP because Code Pandora made a friggin' hour-long album and called it an LP. we're in that age now. And what's even more unfortunate is that those shorter songs on a Ghostemane album on average, they tend to have the better moments in them. Just like little things that stand out, that make the whole listen enjoyable, that are little standout things. And they're on a song that's like 1 minute and 37 seconds. All of the complaints that I just said, they were present on Hexada, and they're present on this album. And there's even similarities besides that between Noise and Hexada. For instance, between the instrumental Android's Dream of Electric Sheep and the song Inside, I think the name was, the contrast between those is like the exact same style as between the songs Changing of the Tides, which was an interlude, and Idle Hands on the prior album. When it came around on this album, I knew what to expect, and it happened. Not really that great of a feeling when you're hearing a new album that you already know what's gonna happen. Plus, his style of like heavily distorted, just loud, overdriven beats that have like moments of ambient silence in between, just like spaced out, making it kind of awkward save for hi-hats. That's here as well. And there's one of the cringiest lines for a song I have ever heard on the track Black Blood, where Ghostemane literally says, unironically I think, "I was born in the wrong generation." I guess at the end of the day this seems like Hexada Part 2, but it isn't the end of the day yet. I've still got more to say. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I still liked Hexada. I mean, despite its faults, it was an entertaining album, but I still kinda like it. To this day, not kinda, I really like it to this day. I think it's a good album. So when hearing this, which is kind of more of the same except different, it's good. And in its own special way, this album is interesting and entertaining despite its faults. See, I can generally let slide all the gripes I had before because compared to the positives of this album and compared to the things that really matter, those are teeny tiny nitpicks. The main concerns I have when reviewing a rap album is how it's produced, how it's mastered, how the vocal performances are, and probably most importantly, how consistent it is with itself. And really, for the major 4 things that I just listed, Ghostemane checks them all off. He's the producer, writer, and the performer after all. There's a noticeable industrial influence on this album that is new. That's why I say it's the same but different, because this one is way more industrially focused. And it's almost like Ghostemane was locked in a room by one of his friends and forced to listen to Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson for maybe a week inside that room until he was allowed to come out into his own studio and record another album. Except he listened to both Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie through this really crappy external like pillow speaker from, I don't know, the early 2000s or the 90s or something. You know, one of those little plastic cream colored pieces of crap. And they had it on the other side of the door, and so he had to hold his ear to it. And you know when you like hold a seashell to your ear and they say you hear the ocean or whatever? No, that's just because your ear is like stretching for more sounds to pull out of this closed little environment that you have. But imagine that that's Ghostemane's ear, that little speaker with the little door in between it, and you hold both hands to your ear like this, and you notice that when you're talking, you sound a bit different. You sound more distorted and actually a bit more muffled. There's less bass to your voice. And now you compare it with your voice now, and it sounds more bassy, and it sounds like it actually has substance to it. Imagine that this hand right here is the speaker, this is the door that Ghostemane was trapped behind, and the ear is his ear. And I think you've got the inspiration for the industrial sources on this album. Oh, and all of that was a joke, by the way. Don't get butthurt with me in the comments, please. I can't handle butthurt anymore. Not since the incident. Anyways, this new element kind of builds off of what Hexada was building up, except no. Hexada was more white noise based, and it really didn't rely on white noise for any song whatsoever. Maybe it had a healthy helping of it in like the end of a song, or they introductory track to the album, which was self-titled Hexada, I think it was. But it never really relied on that for any singular song, or at least anything you'd consider as a song. Here on Noise, it lives up to its namesake. There's much less of the ambient atmosphere than Hexada, and wherever the noisy parts come in, they're generally complemented by another layer of a hardcore influence, even more than what Ghostemane had on prior projects, I think. I only listened to the 2 other albums. 3. But most of all, I think this new influence serves to make this album even more of a disjointed and structurally confusing mess, and that's considering Ghostemane's usual production style. Turn this album on and minimize the player, and just like do gaming or, I don't know, watching porn, whatever you want to do. You will not be able to tell where a song begins and where a song ends. It is impossible, I will tell you that much. Maybe here and there you'll be like, okay, a song ended, here's a new song, but for the most part it's like, and I suppose that would kind of make for a fluid album listen because you really don't know where it begins and ends, and that's kind of similar to an album like The Terror, where there's like fluid transitions in between the tracks and it's like all one long journey. Except it's so oddly timed and just all over the walls with whatever the heck its structure is that you can't even call it a fluid album listen. It's literally just, you're laying gravel down on this little path, you know? Like little stones that you can pick up and throw at car windshields. That gravel path is this album, and asphalt with pavement over it, a typical road, if you will, a government-built and taxpayer-funded road, much smoother than gravel. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. But either way, I like it, because as gravel paths are, this album is rushed. No, this album is harsh. It's filled with a bunch of raw energy, which is kind of an apt description because it surely doesn't sound polished or refined. It's a solid Ghostemane release, even if it's just balls to the wall insane. It's a solid Ghostemane album, even if it's just got a bunch of holes in it, where ideas kind of fell through. My favorite track on here is easily Flesh, because it just kind of embodies all the influences into one song, and I guess that's an iffy thing when you're making an album that mixes all these influences and then you have one song that's the best combination of all of them. But whatever, I like the song, it's pretty good. Can't say much more. I mean, did you think you were gonna get a serious review? Because you're not. My channel, my rules, and the one rule I have is that there's no rules. Ciao! Oh yeah, I almost forgot. This.